right, welcome everyone. So what we're going to do right now is just a quick little lesson on how do you calculate without a calculator. And so a lot of times you may have situations where you're taking an exam and there's no calculator permitted. And so what do? Usually the problems will basically just have you switching the decimal place. So it'll be like 64 divided by 0.001 or 64 times 0.001 divided by 0.064. So it could be something like that. And so it's just a matter of being able to shift your decimal. And so I've got an easy way, an easy trick as to how to do that and doing it very quickly. So what I say is, when you have two numbers in your numerator, what you basically want to happen is, I want to calculate this. I want to take a look at this here and make it as easy to calculate as possible. So I shift my decimal just to make it really easy to calculate. So let's just start with that first step. Okay, so in other words, what I'm going to do is, for this problem here, I think it would be easy to do 3 times 2 divided by 2. If I can make this 3 times 2, which is 6 divided by 2, I know my answer would be 3. Perfect. So that's what I'm going to turn this into. So I'm going to shift this decimal this way to make that a 3. I'm going to shift this one loop that way to make that a 2. And I'm going to shift this one over 1, 2, 3 to make that a 2. And I know that this is equal to 3, so I'm just going to write a 3 down. Okay? So that's going to be my first step in solving this problem. Now, whatever you did here, the arrows, in order to cancel them out, if it's numerator to numerator, you want numerator to numerator to go in the opposite direction. In other words, it would be like multiplying by 10 and dividing by 10. So if you can multiply by 10 and divide by 10, what do you get? What's your answer when you multiply by 10 and divide by 10? 1. Perfect, okay? And so those will basically cancel each other out. The same thing is true of your numerator to your answer, okay? So if your numerator is shifting 1 to the right, then your answer, you're going to want to shift 1 to the left. And that's how you could cancel those out, okay? As far as your denominator goes, your denominator is the opposite. If it's denominator to denominator, it works the same way as numerator to numerator. In other words, you would be dividing by 10 and multiplying by 10, and then those would cancel each other out. But if you're doing denominator to numerator, you actually want them both to go in the same direction. And that would be similar to saying, I'm going to multiply my numerator by 10, and I'm going to multiply my denominator by 10. And if you multiply both of them by 10, what's 10 over 10 equal to, everybody? 1. Okay? So you're basically, or if you're shifting in the opposite direction, same thing. Okay? So if they're both going to the left or they're both going to the right, those would cancel out. Same thing with denominator to your answer. If you're switching your denominator to your answer, it's also going to be in the same direction that will cancel out. Okay? So we're going to try this out. Looking at this, I can see that I've got one arrow to the right and another arrow to the right, and I can cancel that out with my denominator because that's moving in the same direction as my numerator. So 1 to the right will cancel out with 1 to the right, and this 1 to the right cancels out with this 1 to the right. What am I left with? I'm left with 1 to the right, okay? And for my denominator to my answer, it's going to move in the same direction to cancel it out. So I'm going to take the decimal, which here my understood decimal would be right after the 3, and I'm going to shift it 1 over. Guess what you put inside there?
0.
A 0. And so my answer would be 30. Okay? The answer would be 30. So let's try another one. So up here it just says, if it's numerator to numerator or denominator to denominator, you want to go in the opposite direction to cancel it out. Numerator to answer is opposite. Numerator to denominator is the same direction. Okay? So let's try another one here. This one is, I think if I do 5 times 2 is 10 over 4, that's fine, but most of us are easier with multiplying. What's 5 times 20? 100. What's 100 divided by 4? 25. I think that would be easier for most people. So let's make it that way. Let's do 5, and you just want to make it easy for you to calculate it first, okay? So it doesn't matter how you arrange it. 5 times 20 divided by 4. So 5 times 20 divided by 4, we said, was equal to 25. So I'm just going to write the answer that I get when I do this. Now, I've got 1 to the right, and then I've got these also going to the right. What happens? Only one cancels out. One of these cancels out with one of those loops. So you're basically just canceling loop for loop, okay? So if I cancel those out, I'm left with 2 to the right in my denominator. If it's 2 to the right in my denominator, which way do I go here? Same direction, 2 to the right. I'm going to go 2 to the right, and what's my answer? 2,500. The answer is 2,500. Pretty easy?
Yep.
Okay, let's try another one here. So this next one says 70 times 0.4 over 0.02. What's easy? What do you think? Maybe 7 times 4 is what? 28 divided by 2 is 14. That's easy. Okay, so let's make it 7 times 4 divided by 2. So you can see I just shift my decimal over just so that it turns it into those numbers that I want, that make it easy for me to calculate. Okay, what happens with 1 to the left and 1 to the right in my numerator? They cancel out. They're in the same line. Same thing would happen if they were both in the denominator. So those two are going to cancel out. That leaves me with 2 to the right in my denominator. So what do I do to my answer? 2 to the right. Awesome. So I'm going to go like that. And what's my answer now? 1,400. Perfect. Okay, let's try this one. What's easy? 2 times 6. Keep it as easy as you can. Okay? So I think 2 times 6 is really easy. I mean, 20 times 6 is easy too. Okay, but 2 times 6 is even easier. So that I know is a 12. So, and that's going to the left. So now I've got 1 to the left and 2 to the right. What can I do? Cancel one of them out. So only one of them cancels out. I'm left with 1 to the right, but this is in my numerator now. I don't have it, it's not in my denominator. So what happens to my answer? 1 to the left. Awesome. So now I'm going to go 1 to the left, and that makes it 1.2. Is that pretty easy?
Yeah.
Okay, and I think they're all pretty much the same. We can try one more just to see how we do here. So this is, what do you think is easy to do here? 5 times 6 is 30 divided by 2 is 15. I like it. Okay, so let's make this 5 times 6 divided by 2. Okay, so what can we do? What's probably the easiest thing to do? Yeah, you could do one of these canceled out. You know, I do want to show you that. The easiest thing to do is probably to cancel these two out, right? Because if I cancel this to the right and this to the right, then I just have 2 to the left. And what would I do to my answer? If my numerator is 2 to the left, 2 to the right, and so my answer would be 1,500. Okay, but I'm going to do it differently because sometimes you would be in a situation where it doesn't work out that way, where it's one that you're looking at. So let's say that instead I canceled one of these out with one of these, because 1 to the left and 1 to the right would cancel out, right? And I'm left with 1 to the left and 1 to the right. Okay, so what would happen if 1 to the left is in my numerator? What do I do in here? Go 1 to the right. Good. And then now I also have this one going to the right. What do I do if it's denominator to answer? Another 1 to the right, which means my answer is again 1,500. So it doesn't matter which way you end up doing it. You could do it either way and still get the right answer. Okay. I hope that ended up helping, and that's my way of doing quick calculations without a calculator.